Hi everyone! Today you're joining me from Campion Hill in Leamington Spa, which is exactly half a mile from where we left the last video about the Midland Oak. In this video we will be looking at two significant locations on this part of the Earth grid, where we'll be diving even deeper down that rabbit hole to identify discrepancies in the narrative, as well as looking at a historical mansion which once stood place at Campion Hill, which is built upon significant man-made underground structure, which you shall see later in this video, as well as looking at Newbold Common with the Newbold Beacon to seeing how the controllers again manipulated the Earth grid for their own purposes. Enjoy this video, as I'm sure the evidence I'm about to give incredible and clear cut of how the manipulators have hijacked the grid for their own purposes. So I'm sure you will enjoy this video. Let's first of all look to the left, what used to be the Campion Hill golf course, which is where the ladies golf club used to originally share the gentlemen's golf course at Campion Hills, which is where we are now. And just looking now, we can see, because in the last few years, this whole area where the Campion Hills golf course was, has had a lot of earthworks done to it, as you can see. It created a cycle track for where the whole of that golf course was. And it's no surprising that the energy line, which mentioned in a previous video, running from Meriden, which was considered the centre point of England, was famous for the cycling, the home of cycling, because of its memorial. This exact line extends from the Midland Oak Tree to here, which used to be the golf course, and in the last few years they've created a cycle path. So is it a coincidence with the two links with cycles along the same energy line? As we can see, this cycle track at the moment and this hill commands a great view of the town of Leamington Spa and of Warwick. Now we can see the town of Warwick in the distance, and just directly in front of us now is the view of Leamington town centre. And there we have at the end a transmitter called the Campion Hill transmitter with its high frequency. And if we pan just to the left, you'll be able to see that there is a second transmitter and a communications tower just between the two trees, as you can see there. So you've got two communication towers within close proximity of each other. Again, does that manipulate the energy flow of the energy grid on the Earth grid? We are now standing on top of one of the raised earth structures which forms the bike track, and as you can see, it has a great view of Warwick and Leamington Spa. This cycle track was produced in opposition to the locals. We were told that the cycle track will blend in with the natural environment, and to me, the way it is at the moment, it does not seem to blend in with the local environment. Maybe 20, 30, 50 years time, it may well blend into the environment. Newbold Beeches was an elegant and imposing mansion with a very intriguing history indeed, due to its location being on a steep side of a hill, being built at what we are told is the highest point in Leamington. In order to build the massive mansion, major engineering work was required. One of the main features, we are told, was the unusual front retaining wall at the front of the plot. We are told in order to support the plot to contain the hill, a substantial double wall had to be built. The most interesting aspect of the wall is that it's a barrel vault. We are now standing on top what is this retaining wall. The most interesting aspect of the wall is barrel vaulting. This is a very unusual type of construction for a retaining wall. Barrel vaulting is usually used for roof constructions. As you can see on this image, extraordinary barrel vaulted roof of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. A barrel vault is also known as a tunnel vault, as it is an architectural element formed by extrusions of a single curve along a given distance. These curves are typically circular in shape, creating cylindrical appearance. One of the main purposes of a barrel vault is to provide a unique tunnel-like interior to bear a much greater weight than a traditional roof or a ceiling. A barrel vault is also commonly known as an extended arch. The barrel vault aspect of the wall is set against the hillside. However, to me, a barrel vault would suggest could possibly be built into the hillside due to its tunnel-like construction. What makes this part of the wall so unusual is that most barrel vaults are usually in a horizontal alignment. However, it is said that on this wall, the arches are in vertical alignment. The second part of the wall, as you can see on this image, is exactly an arm's length directly in front of the barreled wall. This makes me ask the question, could the barrel vaulted wall with its architectural design have already been in place before work even commenced to construct the mansion? In my opinion, on the evidence I am about to show you later in the video, the only addition to the front retaining wall was the construction of the flat brick wall. The purpose of this, in my opinion, was that this flat brick wall was put up in order to cover up the existing barrel vaulted wall into the hillside. Could that have been trying to cover up existing historical infrastructure from previous human civilizations, such as the Moors? This is the site of where the Newbold Beeches mansion once stood. Today, it does not resemble when elegant mansion once stood. All that remains today as evidence of the mansion ever even existing here is a back retaining wall which was towards the backyard. And here we can see that back retaining wall of the property. As you can see, it was built from a stone structure. But as we move along, we can see that there has been a recent landslide. Could all the earthworks, the other side of where this wall is, of the cycle track contributed to this landslide? All that we have today is, in this area, it's all overgrown by Japanese knotweed and other self-seeding invasive vegetation, as you can see. The person behind the project and the original owner of the mansion, who had it built specially for him, was a man called William Alfred Adams, who was a servant and employee to the Leamington establishment. It was also said that he was the town surveyor at the time. The elegant mansion was designed by W.A. Beeches. There seems to be a shroud of mystery around this property and Mr. Adams. It remains a mystery as to how an employee of the local establishment could possibly be able to build a mansion which could rival those of the richest families in the town. Mr. Adams has been listed as previously living in a small terraced house in the town centre. He was listed living at 3 Y Street. To add to the further mystery to this mansion, the records suggest that Mr. Adams just appeared from nowhere, as there has no previous records for him existed before he lived in Y Street prior to living in this mansion. Then, surprisingly, he disappeared just as quickly, with no further known records of him or his whereabouts, as soon as he sold the Beeches just 4 years after he moved in. It raises the question, could Mr. Adams simply have been a character who had a specific role to play at that particular time? Did he really exist, or did he use numerous other aliases during his lifetime? And was he simply serving the state and the establishment? Let's now take a look at what, in my opinion, is the most interesting part of this area. Where we are looking at now, we are directly above a significant man-made structure underground. It is proven that there is an underground reservoir in this location. However, we're not questioning if it was ever used as a reservoir because the evidence suggests that it probably would have been. So what we can see here, an image of the interior. This was a photo taken during the maintenance of the reservoir on the 30th of July in 1957. As soon as I saw this image, the first thing that came up to my mind was the Karnak Temple in Luxor in Egypt, with those columns so close together and those arches. So let's just quickly compare the Karnak Temple. Do they look very similar? Could they have had a similar purpose? There's two other things that they have in common. Karnak Temple also has a man-made lake, which is called the Sacred Lake, right next to it, as you can see on this image. And upon further investigation, I have found that approximately 3 miles from the site of this underground reservoir is where a very powerful energy line, the ley line, which connects to the Karnak Temple in Luxor, and it goes all the way through to England, passes through the city of Milton Keynes, goes all the way through to the north of Leamington Spa, and this location is exactly 3 miles away from where that energy line is. Is that a coincidence at all? My question would be, could that energy line from the Karnak Temple in Egypt could have passed through this exact location sometime in the history? And not only that, because there are a number of connecting energy lines running in this area, that energy is still being filtered through from that energy line from Karnak to where we are now. Let's now take a closer look at this image. To me, this image seems to be as if it was staged just under that light. We can see 2 gentlemen with brooms, and they seem to be symbolizing the Masonic symbol of the compass, with the 2 gentlemen either side cleaning what is in front of them. Another thing which sticks out in this image is that light that you can see in the arch above the 2 gentlemen. So, as we all know, the Freemasons work with symbology. To me, I can decode this image as it appears to me that there has been a wall constructed blocking off where this structure would have continued further into the ground. One of my reasonings for that is, if we look at the light, we can see the cable connecting it from the ceiling of this structure. Now, would you have a light fixture directly by a wall? There rather be an electrical light fixture somewhere further within so it can illuminate more of the structure. So to me, with the symbology of these 2 gentlemen and the Masonic compass, it seems to suggest to me that a wall has been created in order to block off what was contained behind there. So, what do you think was contained behind that wall, if indeed that wall was used to block off what's behind it? Could that have been a tunnel going in further into the land, connecting to something else? If we look at the picture, it was taken in 1957, which happens to be after the Second World War. So, we shall see later on further military connections as we look into the Newbold Beacon. So, my question is, could there possibly have been some underground military base or some kind of bunker which would have been in use during the Second World War? And could this image be symbolizing that they have blocked off what was contained behind that wall? In my opinion, I can see it that this reservoir and this man-made structure underground has been used as simply a cover-up. Could it have been already existing infrastructure on this site? And then it raises further questions. We can see that this seems to have the resemblance of a barrel vaulted roof. And earlier in the video, did we not mention that on the front retaining wall of the site, there was a barrel vaulted retaining wall? set against the hillside. And what do they do there? They put on a flat brick wall in front of that structure. So what have they possibly done here? Again, put in another brick wall to cover up what was behind there for what they do not want you to know. It's the same with the Karnak temple in Egypt. We are told that the Karnak temple was the largest temple for worship in the world at its time. But these days, many people believe that there was something much greater in Karnak, in the temple. Could it have been some kind of energy center generating electricity or harnessing some kind of energy? So this raises the question, what was the reservoir as a cover-up for this underground structure? The only information that we are told is that this underground reservoir was constructed during the Imperial Industrial Age, which ran from the years 1751 to 1913. We shall shortly be looking at the access point to this underground structure, which has now been sealed off and surrounded by a metal fence. The Beeches mansion was built over the existing underground reservoir. The question has to be asked, why would you build a house on top of a reservoir? What was the reason for it? So, in my opinion, this underground structure could well have been used historically as some kind of fort, a fortification, such as a star fort, or even some kind of energy battery. Let's just take a look at the name, Campion Hill. If we split the word up, we have the word camp, which indicates an encampment or a place where early human civilization would have had a settlement. Then, if we look at the definition of ion, I-O-N, as you can see from the description, it refers to atoms that offer an electric charge. Another unanswered question to today remains, why was the mansion called the Beeches when there is no evidence to support that there were beech trees grown on this specific plot? The most prominent tree within this plot is the Scots pine. Pine trees have their unique energetic properties, as well as pine trees generally having a canopy which is a conial shape, geometric shape, which has an impact on the earth energy, and not to mention the symbology of the pine cone or pineal gland. So is it no surprise then that during the 1970s, 80s and 90s, what did they do in most places around the world, especially in England and in particular in the US? They destroyed a lot of these pine trees. What was the reason for that? Could it have been when they were cutting back a lot of the pine trees around the world? Was it that they were trying to influence and manipulate the control of the energy within the earth grid? As a possible explanation of why the mansion could have been named after the Beeches is prehistoric period. Could there have been Campion Hill and also at the Newbold Common Beacon, which we'll go down to shortly? Could these two sites of these hills have been the location of two giant trees, which could have been beech trees? We are about to finish our journey here with the Beeches. I would like to give you some more fascinating historical information regarding the Beeches. It's very unusual that as soon as Mr. Adams, the original owner of the Beeches, who had it built especially for him, it was said that he was living in the Beeches by 1863, and then just 4 years later, in 1867, the house was put up for sale. And it's no surprise all the subsequent owners of the Beeches also didn't last very long as owners of this mansion. Why is this? So the first time it was re-advertised for sale after being built was in 1867, where it went on sale. And then surprisingly, 4 years after, the property got re-advertised and was offered for sale yet again. And then for a third time, just 2 years later, in 1873, the property was put up for sale for a third time. So during this short period of just 6 years, there were 3 different owners. So again, we seem to be having the 3 and the 6s. However, a buyer in 1873 managed to last for 10 years as owner of the Beeches. And there are a few subsequent owners after that which lasted for around 10 years as well. It started coming to an end of a saga in 1929. It appears that the mansion was stopped being used as a domestic dwelling and instead became used property for the government and some of their agencies. So in 1929, the Beeches mansion had become a training school for domestic servants, which was under the authority of the Ministry of Pensions and Labour. This training school, we were told, was the first of its kind of school, which was attended by young women from across the country. To me, this sounds a bit strange. Turning a house into a school attracted to young women to train as domestic servants. Could that possibly have been some kind of brainwashing and mind control centre that was operating at this place? Considering this was before the era of the well-known MK Ultra project, could this have been used as in some kind of mind control? Time of the Second World War, the whole house and land was owned by the government. And after World War II, this house became home to various other government agencies. The main one, which most people remember, was for an agency issuing national insurance numbers. The equivalent of a national insurance number in the US is a social security number. And however, by 1970, the house, it said, was no longer suitable for any type of occupation. It was left as a derelict and target for vandals. And then just 2 years later, the final saga of this house. In 1972, the local government purchased the property from another government agency, the Secretary of the State of the Environment. Why would the Secretary of the State of the Environment, which is based in London, have a specific interest in this property? Sounds a bit strange to me, as it could well have been sold or simply just transferred from one government agency body to another. It finally came to an end in 1975, just 3 years later, when the local council paid £250, that's around $300, to get the house demolished. So from this, it is perfectly clear to see that the government had no general interest in the mansion. They were far more interested in the land. Now, as a final part on the Beeches, let's look at the access points we can see here. As you can see, all this area is overgrown and it does not look like it's been used for a number of years. Just in front of me, there seems to be a circular corrugated iron structure. This to me appears that it seems to cover a well, and just to the left of that there is what we can see, a small brick building with a grey door that has been sealed and locked tight. Let's just take a look at the back to see what we can see of this fenced off area. Here we can see the corrugated iron, and it appears to have a roof that's made of asbestos. So simply from that, what we are seeing here was constructed probably around in the 60s or 70s, where asbestos was used as building material. Newbold. And just to the right, we can see this structure, which resembles something like an outside toilet used in a Victorian time. So this would have been an access point to the underground reservoir where they done the maintenance work. However, this raises the question, would this have been the original access point for the reservoir? Or would the barrel vaulted wall at the front of the plot could have been used as a main access point in the past? The whole area where we are, including the Campion Hill, is in an area that's called Newbold Common. And as we approach here, we can see this parcel of land here has got an inversion, which is much deeper than the inversion we saw in the previous Midland Oak video. So this clearly indicates this parcel of land, as well as the cycle track beyond, clear signs that this land was used as a quarry in the past. So let's take a look at the word Newbold Common. The word Newbold, the word new, denotes a parcel of land that has been newly brought into cultivation, whilst bold is a Saxon word for building. The two words together indicate an area of land or village that has been more recently established than the adjacent villages. This could have been former wasteland or land that has been carved out of an existing previous human settlement. Newbold normally acquires the landowner's name at the time to distinguish it from other close by Newbolds in the locality. So let's look at the word common, spelt C-O-M-Y-N. The name Common is derived from the notorious Norman Common family who came over with William the Conqueror in 1066. The Comyn family owned this large area of land between 1160 and 1200. The Comyn family, as soon as they came over with William the Conqueror, soon became a force to be reckoned with in England, Scotland and Ireland. However, in 1539, a Richard Wills purchased the land which is known as Newbold Common. The Wills family estate remained in the family hands for over 400 years until July 1943, when what was left of the Wills family estate and land was purchased by two town councillors for a sum of £28,300, which is the equivalent of $36,000 US. Again, this was a rather unusual purchase, as it would appear that these two councillors would have been acting on behalf of the council, because just as soon as they bought the land, they sold it onto the council for exactly the same amount. Just before we get onto the Newbold Beacon, we are now approaching Newbold Common Farm. This was the last farm that was held in private ownership in the whole of Newbold Common. It was sold on to the local government in the early 1950s after being owned by a private family from 1922. Since it was sold on to the council in the early 1950s, it is now used as a venue to cater for private functions and events such as corporate events, weddings and other such things. I walked in front of the Newbold Common Farm. I had an intuition to go in and purchase a coffee to take out. So, as I approached the lady serving, I asked her if by any chance she knew anything about the history of the area that she knew of. Surprisingly, she answered that she was very interested, but she said to me, the lady I need to speak to is sitting right in the corner there, because it was her grandfather who actually owned Newbold Common Farm from the year 1922. Being a friendly person working there, she kindly went over to the lady sitting in the corner enjoying coffee to ask her if she wouldn't mind speaking to me about what she knew of living in Newbold Farm. To my surprise, her family were also doing some research into the family history, so she was more than happy to explain to me her experiences of living in Newbold Farm. So here is a recording of what she said, which I'm sure you will find very interesting.
Bought it in 1922. They had 7 children living there with them, all brought up on the farm. Farmed it until 1950 something, I think. When he died, there were 5 girls and 2 boys to be catered for. So Grandad sold it to the council. But Grandma stayed there until her death. And then my brother farmed it for a while before he took off to Scotland and bought his own farm. My father got the adjacent farm, so it was farmed as one unit. And it was over 600 acres at that time.
Wow, okay.
And they always had the ploughing competitions, the hedge cutting competitions on the farm, which meant they had lovely hedges. And just the other side of Wills Road is a field that goes down to the river, and it used to flood very badly, and Grandad used to sell tickets for people to skate.
Oh, okay.
When it flooded.
Oh, okay.
Wills Meadow.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed, Wills Meadow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think my cousin has been in touch with the powers that be to get it all recorded, and because all those years, everything they did to it, it isn't even recorded, so
No.
that should be coming very soon.
Okay. And how did you find actually, because did you live in the area with your, at some stage, in the house, did you say?
We had a fire at the next door house, in the next door farm, and I myself lived there for sort of 6 months while they were refurbing the farmhouse that we lived in.
Right, okay.
And as I say, my brother then took over and lived here for a while.
And you mentioned the dry cellar, because I don't think we recorded that one. If you mentioned the dry cellar
Yes.
and the mosaics.
Yes, the cellar was beautiful, lots of alcoves, and when one of my cousins had her 21st birthday, my uncle, who was an artist, painted all these murals on the walls. I believe that they may have, when they decimated the house, have put the rubble in there. It's now slabbed over. You can't get into it, and I think they've missed the trick, because a good dry cellar would have been ideal.
And do you know any ideas why it would have been dry or anything like that?
On a hill?
Something here, obviously, you haven't got
Yes, no,
moisture.
it was never wet.
Because obviously you've got the vaulted columns and everything like that on the ceiling.
Yes.
No, it's all been completely knocked
Yes.
down. There's just a wall there, retaining wall that's
Yes.
collapsed now, and that's all there is, just overgrown.
Yeah.
So it's a shame, really, because
Yes.
he spent a lot of time, you know, because it wasn't that well. How he managed to get a mansion, because he wasn't that wealthy, from what I've researched.
Who are you talking about?
The guy who owned
Beeches.
the Beeches,
I don't know
because
who
he
owned
wasn't.
the Beeches. It was owned by the council when I was young.
I think they took over at some stage.
Yeah.
And then obviously for the.
Well, I was going to say, that wasn't owned by the Wills family, was it? The
Wills
Beeches.
were down here.
Yeah.
And there's a.
Oh, but I was saying, when Grandad bought the farm, he had to buy packmoors as well down in Leamington,
Right.
and it was a nightmare. They were being sued for foul drains and slum, and
So there was a lot of conflict,
Oh,
so to
absolutely.
say, with the local
Absolutely.
authorities.
Yes, definitely.
Yes,
Yes. And I noticed the buses still bear the name Packmoors.
Patmore.
Yes.
Well, it's Warwick, isn't it?
It's
Yes.
Warwick, yeah, Patmore's, yeah,
Yeah.
still got the
Yeah.
factory there, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
but it was a slum. But it went with the farm, and if you bought the farm, you've got to buy the Packmoors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Grandad at one stage was being sued.
Are they the 2 craters from the bombs that were dropped, do you know, at the beacon? Because as you come up the
Don't
hill,
know.
there's
Don't
2
know.
craters.
They've been like years because a lot of bombs.
So there were.
From Coventry.
Yes.
They dropped up because where I used to live, we had bombs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you have any idea what year that would have been? Because it's not
It
really.
was the Blitz.
So it would have been during the
It
Blitz.
was the Coventry, when they were decimating Coventry, which is what, 42? Was it?
40. That's the year that.
Yeah, Blitz, Coventry got burned down.
Yes. Yeah, because it
Most
seems
of
a
the
bit
folk
strange.
that were alive then are now dead.
Yeah, it seems a bit strange why they would just drop bombs randomly in certain places.
No, it was because they were offloading their bombs on the way back, but they hadn't actually offloaded on Coventry. There were 2 or 3 that they offloaded. They didn't want to take it back again. But I agree with you. Why didn't they do it that way?
Why didn't they do something exactly? They could have done it in more.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know that there was
Unless they made a mistake and they thought it was Coventry before, or they did it before. We don't know, do we? We don't know whether.
But you would have thought
before or
Coventry,
after.
you would have been
I
identified.
know
as a
everybody was
cathedral.
everywhere was
Yeah.
meant to be blacked out, but it wouldn't have been, would it?
No.
No.
You can't black out a whole city.
Well, whole
They
city,
did.
yeah.
They did as much as they could.
Yes.
But they,
Oh,
of
yes.
course, it's full moon, wasn't it, when they were down in Coventry?
No.
The full moon. You know, they bombed on the full moon, and you couldn't blank it all up.
Because the family are so horrified that it's not recorded.
Because there's a lot of stuff that wasn't being recorded.
Yeah.
It's a bit like
So you're doing all Leamington, or?
I'm doing a lot of Leamington because it basically started doing regarding the Midland Oak.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, the
that's
Midland
right.
Oak tree in Lillington
Yes.
and stuff
Well,
like that.
The
And then
centre of England.
The centre of England. So I was
Centre of
looking.
England, but it's not actually where it was before.
No, because it was Meriden
Yeah.
and Rugby.
Well, they all said.
So,
But the
so
oak
why
tree
have?
was cut down, the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it led me on to Newbold Common.
Newbold Common,
Yeah.
yeah.
Stuff I made the connection on it.
Yeah.
And now the connection that I've got is to the Arboretum.
Where's that?
That's where all the church in Tatchbrook Street.
Oh, St
The
John's.
spire of St John's.
Oh,
Just
that
behind there, because there used to be
was
a.
a huge big house, privately owned, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Sorry, I
thought-
wasn't listening
Yeah.
to what was privately owned.
It was, I don't know what it was called now. I remember them knocking it down. By St John's on the way to Tatchbrook, there's that big house, and then there was beautiful gardens, and they've just built all
The
that.
Arboretum. Yeah, there used to be that hospital curing for it, and then.
Yeah, and then it's got down, then all the houses have been built on it. They've left a bit, house.
Yeah.
With a big wall round
Wow, that was certainly interesting. And what are the chances of that popping in to get a takeaway coffee and speaking who actually own Newbold Common Farm? It's incredible how the universe works. I found that so intriguing and interesting. I'd just like to point out one other fact that the granddaughter mentioned to me was one of the barns that her grandfather owned from Newbold Farm was rented out to a local company, which was one of the major employers in Leamington Spa for around 40 years. They rented out one of their barns to Lockheed. Now, a lot of you may have heard of the name of Lockheed as being the military aircraft manufacturer, and you would be right, because Lockheed had a factory in Leamington Spa very close to the farmhouse with the purpose of importing components from the US to maintain ex-military vehicles as they manufactured hydraulic brakes. And then after World War II, Lockheed in Leamington expanded to manufacturing brakes and other such components to the automotive industry. However, here is the other connection with the RAF and the military. Lockheed partnered with the RAF during the Second World War with the Hudson, which was probably the most well-known Lockheed aircraft flown by the Royal Air Force during World War II. There will be other references to the military and the RAF as we look at the Newbold Common Beacon. We are now at the Newbold Common Beacon. This beacon and this hill are said to originate from the prehistoric period. This hill has 2 other nicknames. One of them is an observation hill because of the view you can see from the top of the hill. Another common nickname for this hill is Belly Button Hill. To you Americans out there, the word belly button in English is the same word as navel in American. So, as we are walking up this hill, we can see a lovely crow taking a leisurely stroll. Looks like it's being grounded, so use nature as a teacher. And remember guys, stay grounded and connected to nature. And as you can see, just in front of me, to the right, you can see this dip in the hill is one of the 2 craters created from the bombs that were dropped on this site during the Second World War at the time of the Coventry Blitz. It's worth mentioning that at the bottom of the hill, where we just saw the kids' play area, there used to be an actual steam engine station at that point. Could that have been put there purely as kind of symbol? This steam engine was an original steam engine created by the well-known W.G. Bagnell in the year 1944 to help the effort during the Second World War, where it operated at various number of collieries in Wales. However, in November 1980, this locomotive was moved for preservation to Carmarthenshire in South Wales. Then, surprisingly, 3 months after, in February 1981, from being moved from the preservation, it was placed on static display where we saw that kids' play area. It was placed there for the purpose so that children could climb and play on this steam train. This was only in place for 9 years, as we are told it had to be removed due to health and safety concern. They would have carried out full assessment in 1981 before they placed the steam engine at this location. The locomotive is now on static display at Seth Coed Colliery Museum in Wales. This colliery was once the deepest anthracite coal mine in the world. Where you can see the church spire of St. John, we are standing in the exact path of an energy line running from that church to where we are now. However, what makes it more interesting is this particular ley line, exactly 3 miles from where we are now, there happens to be another bomb crater in a cornfield where a bomb was dropped after the Coventry Blitz. Here is an image of this crater, and it's not surprising that the factory of Lockheed is located exactly 1.5 miles from this point, and then another 1.5 miles from that point is where that bomb crater is. Is that another coincidence? If we take this energy line going in the other direction as we walk up the side of this hill, 3 miles the other side, it intersects with the energy line from Karnak Temple in Egypt. So, is that simply a coincidence? Craters and all the numerology simply random? Or could they possibly have been a coordinated and exact effort to disrupt and divert the energy flow of the Earth grid? As we approach the summit of this beacon, to mention that a few months ago I mentioned this site of this Beacon Hill to my friend Chad William, and as soon as he saw the image of this beacon, he said to me that it looks like it was what was a location of giant tree. And being at this site, I can certainly feel the energy that something once previously has stood here. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested at all in giant trees, to check out Chad's channel, A Deeper Conversations with Chad, where he has several videos on the subject of giant trees. Let's now focus our attention on the second energy line that passes through this beacon. This energy line is the same ley line that passes from the Midland Oak Tree, Campion Hill, where the Beeches once stood, and passes through this beacon. However, surprisingly, in the direction running the other side of the tree lines, where you can see on the horizon, it happens to pass through at a distance of exactly 9.36 miles, heading at an angle of 336 degrees. So look at the numbers 369. At that point is Burton Dasset Hills Beacon, which is another highly probable site of a historical giant tree. And if you take a look at Chad's YouTube channel, he mentions that site on one of his videos on giant trees. I will put a link to his incredible channel and his incredible dedication and work to the giant trees so you can find out more information. It also wasn't long when I thought, are there any more links to the RAF? And to my surprise, at the Burton Dasset Beacon, just at the bottom of the hill, there happens to be a former RAF base. So I thought, let's look at these two ley lines we've mentioned that cross at this point. Could there be other RAF connection? To my surprise, I found extending these two lines across the width and the breadth of the country, I have managed to find out that there are at least 18 former RAF bases which were opened and in use during World War II. These two lines align with the 18 RAF bases, and these two energy lines cross where we are standing here. Let's ask the question, would this have not been a significant location for the controllers for its part and contribution to the Earth grid? And connecting the link with the giant trees as well. Historically, you have the giant tree that would have been at the Burton Dasset Hills, the giant tree located at where we are now, together with another one at Campion Hills. These three giant trees would have then, historically, been aligned along this one energy line. So, one of the most central locations in England, historically, this would have been such a major, important energy centre to the controllers, so they can manipulate and control energy running through this grid. This would also explain why behind this hill it was a former golf course. It does not look like a natural environment, so that would be a perfect opportunity to quarry the land, the minerals, in order to disrupt that energy to the Earth grid for their own purposes. So, we've come to the end of this video. I would like to thank you all for watching this video to the end. I always end my videos on a positive. So guys, always question everything. Question everything that's provided. Question the narrative and information that is given to you. And if something does not make sense, be like that innocent child where you question everything. What, why, when? And when you start asking that question, if somebody cannot respond, cannot give you the answer, there's a chance they could be hiding something. Best thing you can do then is to think outside the box. And if you care about anything so much, the more you care about anything, then the lies will stick out like a sore thumb, leaving the truth able to be enlightened, and the truth, the real truth, will be given to you in lots of other ways. Trust the truth. The truth is now much stronger than the lies. The truth can never be buried or suppressed. We are the age of truth. So thank you guys. In the next video, we will be looking at the historical healing waters of Leamington Spa. Love and light to you all.